Okay, so it's April 13th, Friday, naturally. So, worst days for the superstitious, I guess, but luckily I'm not. This is just about masculinity, I guess. It's been on my mind because I finally gotten over the fact of a breakup that happened quite a long time ago. And it was my first relationship, so feeling a bit sour overall, but ready to pick myself up and start doing self-development. And to do that, I actually decided to check out a couple videos on a topic I already know about, Fight Club and Taxi Driver. And basically, between them and Coach Corey Wayne, I'm starting to get a really good picture of masculinity, proper masculinity. Because for me, when I was growing up, masculinity was always really Tyler Durden-esque, except less suave, a lot more brutal. So not even, it was the worst of Tyler Durden, basically. Where to start? Well, for one, if we're looking at the news today, we see a lot of stuff going on in Europe, and basically, let's see, how should I put this? There's two videos, I'll link them in the description, but Taxi Driver, A Study in Masculinity and Existentialism, and Fight Club, Masculinity and Modern Culture. And these two videos struck me pretty heavily, as well as the Fight Club trailer itself, specifically, because they're all pretty relevant to the topic. I'll put them in the description, like I said. Now, let's see, I've lost tab on. There we go. Sorry, I'm jumping between tabs and stuff so I can actually take notes sort of on what I'm talking about, because they kind of go off the top of my head. Putting the relevant topics, relevant politics that we see today going on, if we say Europe, what we're seeing is Taxi Driver versus Tyler Durden. And Islam is basically Tyler Durden, as far as I can tell. They're completely bitter about patriarchal figures, which would be represented by the U.S. culture in their culture, loosely defined as it might be. People can snicker at it, but they do have a culture, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. Versus the American system, which seems to be going through its own very Fight Club-esque style thing, where the old reigning paradigm is essentially consumerism. And members of society are going through a total transformation in how they see things, because the old order isn't working. It has to change, obviously. The internet basically makes the old order not work properly. The limitations on power and the abuse of power that are occurring or being talked about and dealt with are still evolving, although we've got a pretty good grip on it now. What we're seeing in the US is sort of a prolonged variant of the ending of Fight Club, where Ed Norton basically shoots himself in the head to get rid of Tyler Durden, the alter ego. But another way of perceiving it is actually that what he's doing is he's consumed Tyler Durden, sort of like Ouroboros, the self-devouring snake that eats the world or whatever. And in this case, it's not exactly just metaphorical in a sense, or it's metaphorical, but it's not necessarily off. It's sort of Jordan B. Peterson's version of a metaphysical idea, where Ouroboros devouring itself isn't simply evil, like Fenrir in Norse mythology with Ragnarok, but it's actually See, in Norse mythology, Fenrir is the wolf that devours the world or something like that. And Ouroboros is the snake that devours itself after circling the world, which represents cyclical history and so on, most of the time. Now, Fenrir could be considered a specific point in time during that cycle, specifically where the mouth meets the tail. And the rest of Ragnarok in Norse mythology actually is the rest of the snake. So in that sense, you could look at Fenrir and go, well, that's pretty bad, pretty brutal. Not sure I'm a fan of that. But you can't have that without the rest, and you can't have the rest without that. So it's kind of what's called a necessary evil. Now, Ouroboros specifically in this case, though, more generally speaking, will be the full cycle of someone who's sick of the status quo, goes to change it, finds out what revolution is really like, and then decides maybe they want to settle down as well. That's why there's a Fight Club 2 book out there. Don't know anything about it. Not very well read on that kind of thing yet. And in the process, though, one notices that Edward Norton kind of mans up over the course of the movie. So even though he gets rid of Tyler Durden, the figure, he basically takes over what the various positive qualities of Tyler Durden might be. So the things that attracted him to Tyler Durden in the first place are things that he is actually exhibiting at the end. So that's why there's a Fight Club 2 possible, I guess, because not everything's done. There's still a relationship to be had with Marla. And that wasn't actually really resolved or anything like that. They didn't really go far into it. The movie was mostly about him, and Marla serves as a catalyst for his self-development. So it's just one stage. For the West, at this point, we need to go through our little bit of dealing with Tyler Durden-esque type behaviors and outlooks in life, and providing outlets for men who are disgruntled and disillusioned with the West. Whereas in Europe, they've got Taxi Driver, which means, well, not entirely. In certain contexts, Taxi Driver seems to be a bit of a really cautionary tale. And while it's set in the US, I think that the Europeans themselves are going down a more Taxi Driver-esque path, which is why it's so schizophrenic and off-kilter. I noticed that in some of the stuff. The Europeans are very structured overly. And in one of the videos, Taxi Driver, a study of masculinity and existentialism, Travis Bickle is in fact actually supposed to be, according to the film creator or video creator, an expression of European philosophy put into the USA. And it's done that way to show how it can fall apart and how it fails. He juxtaposes it to a John Wayne movie, which is interesting because John Wayne is triumphant, whereas Travis Bickle is tragic for the most part, except at the very end, and barely. Not really heroic, even when he does kind of rescue the girl, I guess. Which I guess he does do technically, actually. Yeah, but when we're talking about something like Sweden, I guess, where the women are dealing with refugees and sleeping with them, whereas the Swedish men are pretty cocked for the most part. One kind of sees the bitterness that Travis Bickle goes through, and alienation consistently over time as relevant. And the reason I've been thinking about this is because I'm not immune to it. I kind of engaged in it myself. And it's only about a year after the fact that I've actually kind of been able to do a postmortem and kind of actually analyze what I did wrong, where I did it, how I did it, and that, because I really screwed up, actually. It was kind of awkward to admit, but I have to, because if I don't, then I can't really explain why I'm thinking about this or how it makes sense. I managed to avoid the worst of it completely, or complete worst of it, but I'm ashamed to say that I did engage in it. Now then, with that bit out of the way, or put out there, some of this will make a little bit more sense as to why it matters. Because what happened is I alienated someone after they broke up with me pretty heavily. It was the rejection that caused it. And I think that in the contemporary society, there's not a lot going on to help men become more stable or more resilient necessarily. I think that some of that lamenting about how the internet's destroying common culture and so on is actually just a sappy, sad, feel-good, wannabe folksy kind of autistic reading about the situation. I think what will happen necessarily, though, is Japan's solution to the issues, to a degree, as per Atheism is Unstoppable's video on Japan. No, Black Pigeon Speaks video on Japan, talking about the stuff. But Japan isn't perfect, and it's got its own issues, so I don't want to glorify Japan. But basically, return to the family a little bit, and focus on reincorporating lost elements of society from the masculine and right of center perspectives is going to happen and needs to happen. I don't know how that's going to happen. I don't know what form it's going to take. I don't know how to do that for myself in my personal life yet. But some pointers on what might work are giving people a platform from which to develop and establishing rungs on a ladder so that they can climb up. And by that I mean, it's almost like we have a ladder where you can climb up to masculinity, but some of the rungs are missing. So you have to make a leap a lot of the time in different societies. And it might be a different rung in different societies. So you leap like that and like that, or you might climb up a little bit, leap one, and then climb up again. Or, climb up all the way to the top and then have to make a final leap or something like that. No system is perfect and so on, but the point I'm trying to make is that more of these rungs need to be put in place as a societal mechanism so that individuals and the society at large can actually man the fuck up when it needs to, so that women can be women, but men aren't left behind. Because one of the things Jordan B. Peterson mentions, and he's pretty correct about it, is that women get a free pass most of the time in terms of how to develop and go into society. Their actual tasks might be multivariate or varied, multiple different kinds of demands and so on. But the actual way to get these things done is pretty simple relative to a man's, at least in terms of maturation and appropriate maturation. So I'm not sure where to go on this. I think that's about all I got for thoughts. As I sure as hell don't have it in my back pocket, but actually, yeah, screw it. I'll just leave it here because I need a cigarette. Ciao.